Instagram that I haven't had time to test the live streaming, but as you can tell now, I'm able to stream 2 videos and an audio, like a slideshow, onto my stream. So this one's promoting a documentary that's out now on YouTube. You can go to Arenda Tribe in the search and look for Weave in the Future, or type in Weave in the Future. It's a mini documentary about contemporary Navajo weavers, which I was very proud and very humbled to be a participant in, where they interviewed a few Navajo weavers during the first wave of this pandemic, and what our response to the pandemic was and how it works in with our traditional thoughts. So the film premiered at the Portland Textile Festival the last weekend of October, and it's leading up to another premiere that's going to be at the Fowler Museum at UCLA in LA, and that's going to be in January. So there'll be some more interviews. So partial to promotion of that one is why I have this this picture up on that side, if I'm pointing correctly. And just for the new textiles, for the stuff I've been working on, just because the pandemic changed the way my textiles sell, that I've had to incorporate more utilitarian type weavings into my traditional Navajo weaving. And I caught COVID in May, excuse me. And during my recovery, I used a lot of scrap yarn, respinning yarn, and I had a very short window where I could actually weave before I got too weak and had to rest up when I was managing my recovery symptoms. And part of that was, with all the yarn that I had all this massive amounts of black and white yarn and a little bit of every color and a rainbow stored away. So I spun that all up and taught myself how to dress a European loom in my room. And I started weaving a series of shawls that I call my empathy shawls, that I wove. These are the only things I can weave because I couldn't come into my studio without contaminating the area that my dad inhabits. So during the quarantine part, I was weaving in my room on that loom, and it taught me a whole bunch of different ways to weave that used to be a part of Navajo weaving but haven't been a part of Navajo weaving the last 100 years or so. And mainly it's it's based off Navajo saddle blankets, but more importantly Navajo belts, sashes, and horse cinches. There used to be a very common balanced twill weave that horse cinches were made, and they incorporated even tapestry twill into these horse cinches. And that's commonly what I've been working on these past 2 years, to bring more word out that this is a traditional Navajo form of weaving, is tapestry twill. And it's a rare form that isn't practiced very much in a lot of cultures. There's in Peru, there's some indigenous groups of weavers that still weave with tapestry twills. And shawls from Turkey, there's a few nomadic tribes that this is all they did, but their weaving has gone from true tapestry twill to supplemental twill tapestry. So they weave a plain weave background and then they float the twill on that background. So it's kind of like in the flux of becoming embroidery, but they still weave it as they go. So what I learned with those weavings and that loom was that warp tensions don't have to be in the hundreds of pounds like normal, contemporary Navajo woven textiles. They have really massive steel looms, and they have screws, because to get that art feel of Navajo tapestry, there's lots of pounds, even tons of force put onto warps. So once I took that away and went back to a traditional Navajo loom with gravity weights, because this loom is weighted down by 2 cinder blocks, I've noticed that there is a golden tension where even loosely spun yarn does not unravel. If it's too loose, it unravels. If it's too tight, it unravels. So what generally happens if the warp is loose or too tight is that through the act of weaving, it will unravel to the tension it needs to be. So once you get to halfway, the rest of the textile is just a dream to weave. So this one is all of that I learned when I was covering COVID and doing a group of rainbow textiles using the scrap yarn. I've actually made orders to get the yarns for this one because this is merino blended, I think maybe with some suffix. It's a Brown Sheep Company yarn with acid dye and a purple, aqua blue, hunter green, this amber yellow, and orange red, and then the black and white. So I did a series of rainbow shawls and scarves in plain weave, and I wanted to combine what I did with the twill with the rainbow series, and this shawl is part of it. So this one's called Rainbow Obsidian. It is a, I don't pre-draft out my twills. I count them as I go on the textiles because it allows you to pick your center points and change the directions that you need. So it's a broken diamond, one center diamond, and then each diamond that goes this way or this way gets progressively smaller. So by manipulating the heddles, it looks like diamonds that are interweaving in other diamonds. It's a very powerful weaving in Navajo culture, and you've only seen them on a select amount of saddle blankets. I usually call it the horn-toed twill, or the broken diamond, is what they've called it anthropological wise. So I had some requests from people on how I'm weaving European style weavings on an upright loom, which basically is a Navajo gravity loom, because behind me I still have my Navajo wedge weave that I'm going to be finishing up for the herd. And for all of you, the herd is a big art show that I participate in. This will be my 3rd year officially. I won Best of Show in 2018, and I'm still competing, and I still have a virtual booth depending on how everything goes. This year will probably be all virtual again, so I'm trying to adapt my weavings for that. So my weavings typically cost in the 5 to 15,000 range for a larger blanket tapestry, because I normally weave blankets that are beyond 6 feet by 4 or 5, and those it takes me 6 months to weave in my style. I don't have a lot of colors, I don't have a lot of shapes or complexity to them because of the size. So I've approached weaving from that one where I'm actually working on size rather than complexity, because I've done twills in that blanket size. So now I'm trying to combine the traditional knowledge of horse cinches to make them into wearable textiles again. So this one is the first combining all of that, where I have these colors in the spectrum, the 6 in the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and then black and white. But incorporating an ancient technique, well, to me it's not ancient, but a technique that was very common about 1200 years ago, where there was a biased way of weaving with colored warps or white warps like this, where they would twist their warps and interweave the warps as itself to make a garment. And the advantage of that is that there's no heddles, there's no weft. The warps itself become weft and warp depending on your twist. So you do one motion this way, put a stick in, put another stick in, and then move the twist up. So you're weaving one action here, but you're weaving its reverse coming towards the center. So a lot of textiles in that range had this, it looked like knitting, but it was woven. Because you can drop stitches, make holes, and then use those holes to make a pattern. And you only work on one side, and then you're making the back side at the same time. And there was a lot of use of fringes, and the reason why I say fringes were crucial, because it's incredibly hard to weave from the end all the way to the end. If you give yourself at least about 6 inches doing sprang, you have that ability to do decorative braids between the junctions of weavings that will ultimately be used to put the garment together. And it acts very much like knitting, but then it's still woven. So that was my update. I caught COVID very early, and right now, because of that, I take all the mandates and the seriousness very serious, even though everyone around me seems to still think it's conspiracy. So let's get to weaving, and then we will end this, because I don't like my live streamings going over 30 minutes. So right now, the way the pattern is that the warp pairs and their colors here is the warp pairs that I will be going this way, but emphasis on smaller stripes of the dual colors and then doubles of the solid color. So in this way, the final color scheme should be, I have 12 colors going this way in the warps, because there are blends of 2 colors, so that counts as 1 color. So I have 12 here, and then I have 6 because I'm repeating the rainbow colors. But I also have 6 more because there are pairs of those rainbow colors that run in between their colors, just like these warps. So I have 12 times 6 times 6, 36 times 12. It should be a very interesting graduated palette with the clashing colors, making a stripe of brown that's going to go in a diagonal stripe every 4 from the complementary color. So like from this one, I go 1, 2, 3, 4. I get the complementary color, which produces color discord, and if you blended those colors, it gets brown. So this is what artists use to get interest, that they can make beauty from colors that are alike, analogous colors, but to add dramaticism, they work with this, and then somewhere between them, it gets brown. So it's just a rotating spectrum of color that's going in the bias. I have these here to keep my warps from untwisting, because the more you warp and energy you put in this one, the warp tends to untwist. So this one's locking my warp twist for the entire length of this one, because this one's 73, it's stretched out to 74 inches long. Normally I wrap the extra warp on the bar because that guarantees that nothing's going to move. But since I did spraying on this one, and I did the finishing edge spraying at the same time on the full length, I decided I didn't want to change any of the warp tension that was building because of the spraying. So I'm going to be trying to weave this to here before I finally roll the bottom up and then weave from the middle out. So I'm working with 4 heddles. This is a 2 over 2 under 3 thread diamond twill. In an irregular pattern, and my warp spacing, my weft and warp are the same. It's not blanket weight, probably like sport weight, merino yarn in a Z spun. Normally when you're weaving these, you want your warp spun opposite of your weft. So if you're a hand spinner, you do that. When the weaving is put together, it's going to stay square. So this one, without some blocking and shrinking with some tension, it may skew a little. But because I have an alternate reflected twill, it should maintain its shape. One side's going to be very nice, and then the other side's going to be kind of very drapey. So I'm going to do 2 actions going through this one, and that should be enough for people who want to see, you know, European style weaving on a Navajo upright loom. So for this one, I have 2 battens and it's technically a batten, but I call it a heddle stick. This is what I use to get my alternate warps down to the bottom so I can use the main batten. Generally with Navajo weavings, our warps are very strong, are very tiny, tightly spun, and the warp spacing is so wide that, you know, you can put your fingers through and you won't hit a warp on some of them. And the tension is so high that, you know, the space is maintained. On this one, the warp spacing is intentionally set so they rub against each other. So if you're not careful, you will have some shedding that will get into your heddles. And then if you don't maintain your light pressure on it, you can have that warp actually disappear as it untangles and you pull more hairs out of it. So through experience, this is how I've been able to get this 4th heddle down to here. The only other ways I've been able to get past it is when I've used a pull system with my twills, similar to what they used to do in Malaysia, Indonesia. They usually have this master weaving pattern that's up here that has a string attached, and that string is attached to its warp down here in a group, so they can have this whole pattern, and technically they'll have 32 heddles, 16 heddles pulling this special pattern, very much like a jacquard loom, with these groups of 4 groupings of warps that they pull that are all alternate, that take the pattern from that master pattern. So I've done that in some Navajo weavings by using loop heddles. Take a loop of string, put it in here in a horseshoe, and then put it here, and then attach that loop to the heddle that it pulls. So I can have 2 sets of complete strings on every warp, but for each set of those strings, I can harness it to 3 heddles. So I only have 2 of those warp heddles actually on the warps, but I can have 12 heddles up here that pull on those through loops. So I could have more complicated heddle counts. I wanted to do this so I can weave the 19 heddle twill, which is essentially, it's an asymmetrical twill count that has a small 3-thread diamond in a 4-3-2-1 diamond with a larger diamond count that is a 2 over 2 under with a 3 skip, the bordering all of it. That 3 skip is what makes that count possible. And when you have these tighter warp spacings, the 3 count isn't a big deal. I've done twill counts where I have a 5 skip because I have 6 heddles. So all those weavers out there are probably drooling over everything I'm saying, and the rest that don't understand weaving, it's just pulling the string that you need when you need it for the pattern that you're weaving. Okay, so I'm using the shed heddle, so I can pull the strings I need out and look for any binding warps that may be sticking to them, and then I pull the shed a little, and then that threads a twill batten. And this twill batten is based off anthropological data from battens weighed and measured in the 1870s, during the time periods where these twills were more common. And I have 2 threads that I throw through the shed, but they're all the same color now because I'm doing the wideband. And I'm only doing that so my counts don't come off, because I could do it with 1, but I'm making it easier on me. So when I get to the right part, I can substitute the color that comes next without having to change my shuttles. So this is batten weaving when I do this. I do this every so often just to straighten out the shed. So this increases the actions that I need to do for weaving this particular type of weaving, which slows you down, but the weaving itself builds up really quick. And I can already tell that one warp didn't go, one warp is sticking. When you become a really good twill weaver, when you open the shed, every so often your eye will catch on to stuff that's not moving correctly. So that one is over here. This blue warp is creating a pattern that's not supposed to be there. Okay. Okay, something's going on right here too. Yep, and there's a 1. Those 1s and 3s are really important for the pattern. So you should have nothing but 2s and 1s. What's going on there? Oh, there's a black that wants to stay in the back. Let's see. Okay, these are just 2 pairs. Yep, there's another one. There we go. Okay, I'm going to take a small break now so I can share this video on my Facebook. So that was number 2. To save my position mentally, what I do is just this little gap that tells me that's where I need to go, is this next one. You should start seeing the middle diamond is starting to build, even though it doesn't look like that one catched on that one side, but it's not a big thing because the 1s disappear on this one. Normally when I do a 1 count I pair up a warp, but I didn't want to change the symmetry of this, so YouTube, switch my channels. So on my other channel I started reactivating it with weaving with not weaving, music, scans of piano rolls, because I have a virtual piano on my computer. So in this one I'll keep it more of weaving. So let's see if we can share this. Hello for the 2 people that are on there.
Scans of piano rolls, because I have a virtual piano on my computer.
Share.
So in this one I'll keep it more of weaving. So let's see if we can share this. Hello for the 2 people that are on there. Scans of piano rolls, because I have a virtual piano on my computer. So in this one I'll keep it more.
Okay, so there we go. And hello to everyone who's dropped by. This is my impromptu Rainbow Weaving Shawl live stream. There is no script. A lot of times it's just me weaving and BSing. Hoping everyone's safe, enjoying their holidays. This is generally the most busy time of the year for me, because this is when I weave all the weavings that I will enter and sell in the next year. So I open it up so the shed can have some power to open these bottom ones. And just so it's complete, I always use my twill batten down here for 3 and 4. I have numbers for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those familiar with Navajo weavings will probably recognize that, I don't have a shed rod in this one. I don't have a shed rod on purpose because when you use these yarns with less twist, a shed rod, just the mere action of bringing it up and down all the time, untwists your warps, and I don't want that. So all of these have their own shed. Okay, this one. Later on, I'm going to get a better headset phone, maybe a wireless lavalier microphone, so I can not rely so much on this mic, because this mic catches, everything. Semi truck slowing down outside, dogs barking, ghost spirits inspectors from the eternal ether trying to contact people like they show on Ghost Adventures. All that gets recorded. So that's why I have the music kind of piping in the background. And I'm only featuring music for the most part that, they don't mind the streaming of it. Okay, so that was 3, so now on 4. And one thing that's the advantage about having all your sheds on heddle strings is that the stress placed on your warp strings are equal. A lot of times the strings that you pull are the ones that carry all the tension. And if you just have a shed rod, that side particularly does not get the same stresses as the other heddles. And I think some Navajo weavers will notice this when they're finishing. The warps that they're pulling with their heads are actually stretching more than what's being held with the shed rod. And that's why, when I'm finishing, the last 6 inches, I'll actually string up the shed rod to try to keep that from happening. So that the stretching is not just happening with... Okay, something's... Why are you out right there? Oh, yep. I knew it. One jumped. Okay, that looks better. And one thing why I don't do a lot of live streams is because it is technically a distraction, and there are some times when I've done live streams where I've done a big mistake. But I've always incorporated that mistake in my art. So, like Bob Ross used to say, happy accidents. I think I'll just end it, this live stream, on that one, because you got to see the process for just going through one complete action of heads. So thank you for joining me. Leave comments, subscribe. I'm not an everyday poster, but I'll try to put in new stuff as it comes available. Check me out. I'm also a silversmith, so you can go to www.zefren-m.com. or go to artspan.com and look up Zefren, Zefren. I'm also a feature artist for Swaya for Winter Market, so I have interviews coming up with Swaya, the Fowler Museum. So I'll probably post that information in this post. Things coming up, the Herd Museum, which is virtual this year. If you support the Herd, they're also going to be doing their virtual hoop contests. It's a big event, and they're going to do it virtually this year. So I hope that will be how, kind of like how, the virtual show is going to go, how well that one goes. So thank you for supporting my weaving, my art. You can also find me on Facebook or Instagram, just zefren.m.com, or just put Zefren-M, you'll find me. And thank you for supporting Indigenous artists, and everyone have a good, happy holiday.